gotta talk.
Right. Ashoka Oos.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. So Jason, we're going to jump right in here. First of all, guys, thank you for tuning in. Welcome to the Half Guard Half Hour, my lovely podcast here. My guest for this evening is the one and only Jason C.Brown, owner and creator of Kettle Bell Athletics. Jason, thank you so much for coming on my podcast.
Thank you for having me, Mike. I appreciate it. Appreciate the love.
Awesome. So we're going to dive right in, Jason, because, you know, I've heard nothing, as I mentioned before, nothing but great things from Gavin about you. Had a chance to kind of look things up and do a little bit of research and background on you there. And so I just want to begin with, if you can, talk to me about Kettlebell Athletics. You know, I know it's a program that you created. Can you tell my viewers who maybe don't know anything about you a little bit about Kettlebell Athletics and what that program is all about?
Sure. So I'll give you a little bit of my history. So Philadelphia I'm from, not originally from Philadelphia. I'm actually from the Pocono Mountains, which is a mountain chain in Pennsylvania for you New Yorkers, if you don't know that. Not as cool as the Adirondacks or the Catskills, but they're beautiful little foothills, we'll call them, right? So right after high school, I went in the Marines. After the Marines, I moved to Philadelphia. And that's right when Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, like the first UFC, the second UFC was starting. And Philadelphia had this coach. His name is Steve Maxwell. He's very well known in the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world as well as the physical culture world. I was just in the right place at the right time, Mike. He actually had the first kettlebells made. They were not commercially available yet. And he had some of his students, his Jiu-Jitsu students, make these things called kettlebells, right? And they were just like a ball bearing with a handle welded onto it. And his students were fortunate enough to train with these weird things that we have never seen before. So Steve had the first Jiu-Jitsu academy on the East Coast, even before New York, if you can believe that. And he was also the first individual that had kettlebells, and they were homemade kettlebells, like machine shop made kettlebells. And I got exposure first to the kettlebell via Steve Maxwell. And then Pavel's material, Pavel Seslin's material came out, entered the Russian Kettlebell Challenge was his first book, but he had some other stretching books prior to that as well. And Kettlebell Athletics was a business that I started in 2003. And I thought it would last maybe 3 to 5 years. But this year alone, in 2020, I had 42 workshops and certifications planned for Kettlebell Athletics. But then unfortunately, New York City had to go and ruin everything, Mike. No, I feel bad for you guys. It's a horrible situation, but we'll get back on track. But I had 42. I thought it was going to die in 3 to 5 years, but it's still going so strong. 17 years later, it's crazy, Mike.
Awesome. Awesome. So what exactly what is Kettlebell Athletics, right? What's the program entail? I know it's probably, you know, a big question, but what is your program entail? And talk to us about how you came about creating it more so.
So roughly, generally speaking, there's two camps in the kettlebell world. There's something known as a hard style, and there's something known as a soft style. Soft style would be like gear avoid sport or kettlebell sport. That would be the competitive side, the softer side, the more efficient side of the kettlebell world. And then generally speaking, there's the hard style schools. That would be something like Strong First or RKC. And my original education was besides Steve Maxwell, was under the RKC school. And I think Kettlebell Athletics, what I like about our approach, Mike, is it's a blend of both of those approaches. Because unfortunately, and I'm sure you've experienced this in the jiu-jitsu world and other forms of human movement, there's really black and white opinions on things. But I don't have those opinions. I think there's value in many, many variations and many, many approaches. So I think Kettlebell Athletics is really, personally, if I'm a little bit biased, but I've been told by people as well, it's a good blend of both approaches, and we're not very dogmatic. And I think that non-dogmatic approach to something as simple as the kettlebell really appeals to people.
So you're a coach of coaches, you're a coach of athletes, you know, and you are a jiu-jitsu player yourself. So how do you keep your program fun and interesting? Because I saw some of your videos and you know some of the stuff on YouTube that you have up, and I very fascinated as a jiu-jitsu player and as somebody who's just I'm 33 years old, or excuse me, 33, almost 40. I'm wishing I was 33. Um,
That was a little bit off, Mike. 33,
Yeah,
40.
I was a little off. 33 is when I started jujitsu.
Okay.
So I've only since starting to work with Gavin have really started to dabble in the kettlebell world, in the strength and conditioning world. I kind of got to brown belt on my own, just jujitsu, right? No other strength and conditioning. And the stuff that you have up and the stuff that I was able to watch looked like it was so much fun. So as a trainer of coaches and athletes, um, what do you think the toughest part of your job is? What do you feel has been the toughest part of your job so far?
That's a great question, Mike. That is a really great question. So it doesn't even have anything to do with actual science or actual moves. I think the hardest part is overcoming the dogma, right? That there's one correct way for you, right? There's like, you and I have to do the same thing, right? But I'm 47 and I've been doing jujitsu since 97. I'm probably beat up a little bit more than you. You're right. You're a half guard player. I am not a half guard player, right? So you have a different game. I have a different game. You have a different life. I have a different life. And I think the hardest part being a coach is bypassing the dogma and actually having I'm going to use the word client, but I don't like the word client. It's having a student based approach to teaching, as opposed to, well, I'm a student of this one system and this is the system that I have to give all of my clients. No, it's not. For example, I actually had the first CrossFit in Philadelphia back in the day as well. It was really hard to get people to appreciate CrossFit when I had these 47-year-old housewives or moms that didn't want to learn barbell power cleans. And it's like, but this is this is a fundamental, this is one of the basic moves you need to approach. Well, there was no resonation at all. There was just a huge disconnect. Like, why do I have to learn these big barbell skills? It took me forever to learn that. You have to bypass the dogma, man. I think that's the hard
Awesome.
part.
So, you know, what advice do you know, as a newer coach, right? I've only been coaching jiu-jitsu since June. What advice do you give to newer coaches or people thinking about getting into whether it's jiu-jitsu, kettlebells, anything, right? Any kind of coaching field where you're dealing with athletes or people who want to compete. What advice do you really pass down to the people that you're coaching about how to be better at their jobs or be better for their students?
I think you have to, another great question, Mike. I think you really have to be into the people you're working with and not be afraid to say, I can find someone better for what you're looking for. And I'm sure you've experienced this. I know Gavin, I'm sure all the coaches on this video have. There's just, I think you really have to be into the people that you're working with, and they have to really be into you as well. You really have to enjoy one another's company. And we're not always the perfect fit for one another. And I think the professional thing to do and the honorable thing to do would be to say, look, I think Mike is a better person to teach you the half guard than I am. And I think a lot of coaches and fitness people, we want to be presented as the expert. We want to be well, I can help you with fat loss, and I can help you with hypertrophy, and I can help you with jujitsu, and I can help you with lacrosse, and I can help you with hockey. No, you probably can't, right? Maybe not.
No, not at all.
Or you try to do all those things, you won't do them all very well. So I think it's okay to refer out to people. And I think it's really important that you become a people person more than like the hard skills. You can train people how to do a squat, but you cannot train people to remember people. I'll give you, this is a horrible example of a jiu-jitsu school in Philadelphia. Mike, I trained there for 6 months at the noon class. 6 months I was paying tuition and training there 2 to 3 days a week at the noon class. The noon coach never learned my name. He would refer to me like guy in the blue gi or man on top. And it wasn't a big class. I don't know what it's like in New York City, but our noon classes in Philadelphia are not huge, right? They're pretty small, 10, 15 people. You should have known my name. You should have known my name on day one, right?
Yeah, I agreed. And that's something that my coach at Clockwork Jiu Jitsu, Josh, he's very, like, it's one of the things that has always impressed me about him is the fact that, like, literally from the minute you walk in for an intro to the minute you leave that intro and come back, if you sign up, he knows your name and, like, greets you every single time that you walk into the gym by name. And it's such a truth, and it's such an effective method of letting your people know you care, right?
Right. I remember getting made fun of, but I could tell. I don't own gyms anymore, Mike. I sold them off a while ago. But I could tell when, this is corny, but when the women got their eyebrows done, and people would make fun of me, like, do you have to go that far? It matters.
Yeah,
it really
no, 110%. So your programs, again, and I brought this up before, but your programs look like they're so much fun to do. They're not, as you mentioned, to me, running on a treadmill and staring out the window is boring. Running, those types of things like that, the very static workouts are very kind of boring to me. And that's one thing I appreciate about Gavin, but I also see in your videos, you make your workouts so much fun to do. And there's everybody in the videos I've seen that I've watched this week of yours, everybody's got a smile on their face. How do you tailor your programs that way, so that way they are fun and people are having a good time versus just doing something very static?
You're good. You're full of the good questions, Mike. I read, and I can never remember where I originally learned this, but I read the phrase once: pleasure makes everything easy, and easy is productive, right? So since I read that quote, I have tried to make everything fun and enjoyable for our clients and our students. And if it is fun and enjoyable and they enjoy the atmosphere, they will always come back. If it's militaristic, if it's obnoxious, if it's hardcore, in your face, killer nonsense, that will turn off quite a few people. So, I mean, it's totally cool to be a tough guy. I love being a tough guy. I'm sure you love being a tough guy. I'm sure Josh loves being a tough guy, and Gavin and Lamar love being a tough guy. But it's also cool to be playful and fun, And I think that resonates with more people than this paramilitary approach to human movement. Also, I think and this is a little bit contrarian, Mike, but exercise is really unnatural for a lot of people, right? Like, if you ever watch an exercise class, there's no other mammal that does this. There's no other primate that sits around and does crunches for 30, 40 minutes, right? They're just really good at being animals. I have two German shepherds. They wake up and in 1 second, they are sprinting in the backyard, jumping over chairs and having a good time. Humans, we need, because we're not good animals, we need 30 to 45 minutes of a warm-up just to get prepared for our movements. So I think if we can keep it playful and light, it resonates with more individuals. And I think that comes with you just doing a good job as a coach to keep the atmosphere and the community light and playful.
No, for sure. And again, as I mentioned before, the whole strength and conditioning side is fairly new in the last, like, 3 to 6 months for me. And one of the things that I appreciate about Gavin and his style is that playfulness to it, because he's showing me movements, and something you just said kind of struck home for me is that at the end of the day, they're things that our bodies are not used to as humans trying to do. Like, right. I can't jump rope for shit. But, like, Gavin hands me a ring and is like, here, jump in and out of this. Let's start you here, right? Let's, like, get your feet moving properly. Let's get your muscles firing, and then, you know, we'll graduate you to it. And sometimes I just feel like, wow, am I an idiot for not knowing how to jump rope? And so, you know, that really kind of, like you just mentioned, strikes home for me. Now, let's talk about your jiu-jitsu journey. 1997, you mentioned that as when you started jiu-jitsu.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry?
97 or 98, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
Yeah, 97, 98, somewhere around there, yeah.
Cool. So what got you huh?
I'm still a brown belt. I'm a bit lazy.
So I'm sure you know what got you interested in jiu-jitsu. You talked about the UFC, and I think that kind of resonates with a lot of us jiu-jitsu guys, but what really got you interested in jiu-jitsu, and talk to us a little bit about your journey so far through the ranks.
I think I must have a little bit of Japanese DNA in me, Mike. Usually, you know, biologically I'm Slavic and German, right? But I was always interested in Japanese art, like the aesthetic, the art, the design, Japanese design, but also the martial arts as well. Before jiu-jitsu, I was samurais and ninja, and I know jiu-jitsu is the art of the samurai, but I was into ninjutsu as well. I think any kid in the 80s was into, you know, ninjutsu. So I always had that I was always attracted to the Japanese arts. And then I saw Royce Gracie in the UFC, and I was like, this is it. I didn't know where Brazil was. I was asking my parents where Brazil was, and they told me. And then when I moved to Philadelphia, and I this is how old I am, like, I looked in the yellow pages for a jiu-jitsu school, and that gentleman that I earlier, Steve, came up in the yellow pages, and the rest is, as they say, you know, history.
So what's your favorite part of being a jiu-jitsu player, and what do you feel it has been your biggest takeaway as a coach yourself in the strength and conditioning world from jiu-jitsu?
I think what you just said, Mike, what is your biggest takeaway from being a jiu-jitsu player? And I use this term, play deficit disorder. And particularly in this current situation, I think there is a real deficit of play. And jiu-jitsu, besides being a great martial art for self-defense, I think it allows individuals like you, me, Gavin, some of the Lamar, I am old, brother. I'm like 48. I hope everybody's well in Maryland. I think it allows guys like us to be playful and roughhouse, right? Like you and I get to roughhouse with one another in a safe environment. You get to beat me up. I get to beat you up in a playful way. And at the end of the day, it removes our mind from our bills. It removes our minds from the coronavirus. It allows us to escape the day-to-day grind. And I think that is the biggest takeaway from jiu-jitsu, for me anyways. It's that escape from the day-to-day hassle of just everyday life. But I think it's a great way to maintain a playful spirit.
So being a jiu-jitsu player, and you talked a little bit about it before, what's been as a jiu-jitsu player, what's been your worst injury to date so far, coming off the mats? Like what's been your worst injury?
AC joint separation. Here's a cool little story. Mario Yamazaki, the UFC ref, had a school in Philadelphia for like one summer. It was actually technically not in Philadelphia. It was in a suburb called Norristown. And I was trying to pass Mario Yamazaki's guard, and he swept me so quickly I didn't have time to forward roll or roll really well. And I posted off my shoulder, and I separated my AC joint. And at the time, I didn't have any health insurance. I was in college, and I was working at a bookstore, so there was no health insurance. So every time I had to lift my arm overhead to put books away from my job, it was horrible. I couldn't sleep in the fetal position for like 9 months. That was probably the worst.
Yeah, I actually had a grade, just coming off of a grade 2 separation myself. Last night, clockwork closed, judo thrown, and that was the end of my shoulder for 6 weeks. So, guys, for those of you guys watching, please don't forget, drop some questions in the box for us, or for Jason, any questions that you might have. We'll get to them towards the end of the show. Gavin has already asked a couple of questions. We're going to save those towards the end. Uh, so take me through what types of training you would recommend for a jiu-jitsu athlete in this time of COVID, where we're trapped at home and we're not training and we're not rolling. What are some things or some fundamentals that you think jiu-jitsu players should be working on?
I think body weight training would be probably the most ideal, just because that's everything that we have that, right? A kettlebell would be very useful. Dumbbells would be very useful. I'm not sure what the situation is like everywhere, but at least in Pennsylvania, our cops were told not to give anybody a hard time if they're outside. Like, focus on the bad crimes if they're bad crimes. So although we're in a state of like, social distancing, I take my dogs to the park every single day. I take my boys to the park. Everybody's fine. And the cops leave us alone. There's no, right? So I guess you could set up a suspension trainer or rings, but I think the best thing would just be to take your kettlebell in your body someplace and do a nice little body weight and kettlebell complex, or a nice little circuit, or a nice little flow. I think that would be most appropriate. Medicine balls are totally undervalued. I think medicine balls are great. If you're into, they're not my favorite tools, but I think club work would be good. Steel mace work might be an option for some individuals as well. But med balls, kettlebells, body weight, I don't think you. And bands are sweet as well, right? You can take a band anywhere. You can do a band in a closet.
Yeah, I think bands are. I have bands. I think bands are kind of underrated in some areas. I think they're not looked at because they're pieces of rubber that they're not going to be as helpful. But I found that using those bands during this time period has been really helpful in replacing some weights.
Yeah, I think bands are very valuable for finding those little nooks and crannies within a particular range of motion that you may actually be struggling through, particularly if you're a guard player. And, sometimes like maybe your hip is weak in this one little area. Maybe your adductors or your groin is weak in this one little area. And you can take those bands and maneuver them in such a way that you can get that nice little stimulation of your hips or your groin or something like that, right, and focusing right on that little nook and cranny, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, for sure, 110%. So as a coach of coaches, what do you feel has been your greatest accomplishment to date so far? And to kind of piggyback off of that, where do you see yourself going with your program over the next 5 years?
Greatest accomplishment? I don't know, Mike. That's too tough to answer. I don't know. And I'm just fortunate to do what I do. I mean, it's crazy where this field has taken me. I've gone to Brazil. My wife is Brazilian, so that helps. But I've gone to Brazil 5 times, gone to a bunch of different countries. It's crazy, And the language of movement, it's universal. And I think it's in the language of jiu-jitsu, as you know, man, this is the craziest thing. I was having an issue with one of my websites, and I use Squarespace for my websites. So the little support chat, I was chatting with some guy in Ireland, and he writes back, "Oos." And I was like, oh my God, this guy, he plays jiu-jitsu. Then we spoke on this little Squarespace chat for like 35 minutes about the name of his school, how he's training, how everything's going well. He's a father of 2 boys. They're training in the backyard. I'm like, oh, that's very similar to me, right? So it's jiu-jitsu is universal, and human movement is universal, right? And it's attractive to people, and then people enjoy moving with one another. I think my biggest accomplishment, Mike, would be that I'm engaged in this field, and this field is able to feed my family and myself. I don't know. Awesome. I don't know if that's corny, but I'll go with it.
Awesome. So you mentioned, being a father of boys. Do you hope they get into jujitsu, or are they like, are you just hoping they do their own thing and you know, grow up?
I want them to be killers, but right? I want them to be killers. I don't know if they will be. I think they all have I think they could be if they wanted to, but I'm not that type of dad that forces them into anything. So if we, like I have 200 square foot of mat space in my backyard. It's actually a little shed that I built. So we'll do like I don't know if you're familiar with the Gracie Games,
Yep.
but we'll do like Crazy Horse. We'll do mount escapes. I try to keep everything super playful but I think naturally boys like to grapple. And I know some girls that really love the grapple too, even like some nieces and nephews that are really killer. I don't want to be sexist and say boys like to grapple because I think it goes across both sexes. But I think it's natural for primates to grapple and other animals to want to be playful and physical with one another. So I think it's really easy to engage in that activity with the boys. I have a 7-year-old. He's formally in class at kickboxing. He does kickboxing twice a week, which is super light, chill, and then he does one grappling class. He's really into it. The older one, I have a 16-year-old. He's done judo and jiu-jitsu, and the middle one has done judo and jiu-jitsu as well. But I don't force them into anything. They have their baseball, they have their lacrosse, which I'm totally cool with.
Awesome. Awesome. So Gavin had a question, and it's
Hold
not
on.
embarrassing, I promise.
Mike, did Gavin tell you about the time he pepper sprayed me?
No.
No? Okay.
Tell us
We'll
about
talk
the
about
time
that.
Gavin pepper sprayed you.
You want to hear this story?
Listen. I love Gavin. I've known Gavin my entire 8 years of being a jiu-jitsu guy at Clockwork. It wouldn't surprise me. So yes, please tell us about the time Gavin pepper sprayed you.
I don't know if Gavin wants that information out there, but you know, Gavin was a guitar player for a band, right? Gavin
Yep.
saying it never happened. Oh, this happened. So back in the 90s, again, I grew up in Pennsylvania, and there was a lot of, we'll just call them skinheads, right? There was a lot of skinheads in the music scene in the 90s, right? And the singer to Gavin's band was black, right? So these skinheads were not being very polite to Gavin's band and yelling totally inappropriate racist bullshit. But I'm in the crowd because I'm Gavin's boy. I'm his fan. We didn't actually know one another yet, but I still love Gavin. So I'm rocking out, right? Listening to Gavin's music, and these idiots behind me are yelling racist bullshit. And so the singer takes out his genitalia and shakes it at these skinheads. And as soon as he did that, all hell broke loose. So here comes Gavin with a big can of pepper spray. It just blasted everybody in the first few rows. And I just happened to be there. So
Awesome. Again, does not shock me at all, but I think that is I love you even more for telling that story. And that's pretty fucking badass. Gavin asked, when are you going to come to Diamond Heart and Physical Culture Collective and do a workshop?
Gavin, as soon as the East Coast gets opened up, brother, I will drive up. Whenever that will be.
Whenever, yeah.
In Pennsylvania, so Pennsylvania has 67 counties. Some of our counties are super rural, like with one case of this nonsense, and the other like Philadelphia County has the most, and my county has the second most. So this could actually go into June or July, actually, where I am. So we'll see. As soon as I'm free, Gavin, I'll drive up, brother.
I will gladly be there with bells on, literally. What is your, last question for you, Jason, and then I'll let you go. What is your advice on recovery, right? Because I think the biggest thing is a lot of people, especially in my world, they train jiu-jitsu 4 or 5 days a week. They do strength training in between. They don't let their bodies rest. So what is your advice on recovery, and what recovery methods do you recommend?
That's great. So three things that I think are very valuable. One is cold showers. I take cold showers throughout the year. First thing I do in the way, I set the coffee, I let the shepherds out, I go up and take a cold shower, come back down, let the shepherds in. Cold water, I think, is a huge recovery aid. Just not even physically, Mike, I think it's one of the most beneficial things you can do to clear your mind and make your day and your mood just much, much better. Second thing is super low aerobic activity. I think walking is the most valuable human movement we can do. And unfortunately, it is totally underutilized. I think the average human should walk 5 miles a day. But when I say walk, I don't want earphones, earbuds in. I don't want zoning out on your phone. Walk, notice blue jays, notice cardinals, notice bees and everything, right? Just be out in the sun, in nature, walking, not a care in the world, wander, right? And number three is just, I gave you, what did I give you? I gave you cold water.
Walking.
And lifestyle. But in terms of lifestyle, I think it's a little bit more important, Mike. I think it's more important if we're strictly talking training. I think it's more important to train at like 50 to 60% more consistently or more frequently than it is to have 2 or high intensity days per week. So if you can get in a session that's like 50% 5 days a week, I would lean that way as opposed to super intense on Monday, super intense on Wednesday. I would prefer 50% 5 days a week. That's just my approach.
Awesome. Jason, that is some advice I definitely am going to take, especially the walking piece, right? Because I'm one of those guys. I walk down the street with earbuds on. Life is just going. I've got the music playing. And it's been a long time since I've been able to like really just notice the world around me and watching the world now the way it is, especially here with the COVID in New York City. I've been in my car driving and just exploring New York City without any music playing. And that's been super peaceful. I can't wait to the day where I can actually walk amongst the crowd and just kind of see people again and get out there. Jason, thank you so much for being a part of my podcast. This is the time where I let people, if they have anything to plug, please, the floor is yours.
Just Google Jason C.Brown. You can find my websites. I'm not very good on social media, everybody. I apologize for that, but I am very approachable if you do find me. So please reach out, and if I may be of service, I'll do the best that I can. Thank you, Lamar. Here, brother. David Bravo.
Awesome.
Thank you,
Jason.
Mike.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you so much, Jason C.Brown. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. You too. Good night.
Good night, guys.